Channel's Week in Review. Violence in Israel over the Temple Mount and more rockets from Gaza, the nanny's mommy talks, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Violence in Israel is heating up over the high holiday season, and the Israeli government is going to start using live rounds to shoot at rock-throwing Palestinians. The ongoing dispute over the Temple Mount that's heated up in recent years as more Jews make more frequent trips to the top of the Muslim-ruled area is now a conflict becoming even more heated. The Israeli government banned two Muslim groups whose members had been screaming at Jewish visitors to the Temple Mount September 9th. Palestinians responded with protests and in some cases rock throwing. After an Israeli police raid on the Temple Mount that yielded a cache of weapons, Palestinians in East Jerusalem stoned the car of a Jewish man, causing the car to swerve into a pole, killing the driver. In response to that last incident, Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat announced that police may now use live fire on Palestinians throwing rocks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu endorsed this approach, saying, quote, "Stones and firebombs are deadly weapons. They kill and have killed," adding, quote, "Whoever tries to attack us, we will hurt them." While many outlets have reported that the two Muslim groups banned from the Temple Mount had engaged in violence, a news database search could not find a single English or Hebrew language article asserting that the two groups had been accused of violence prior to their being banned on September 9th. Indeed, in an interview 2 weeks prior to that with the most vocal advocate for Jews ascending to the Temple Mount, Yehuda Glick, the report described the actions by the two groups, Murabi Tun and Murabi Tat, as harassing and heckling, with no mention of violence. Glick had a one-on-one meeting with Netanyahu to discuss the Temple Mount situation on August 19th. There have been examples of Muslim violence against visitors to the Temple Mount in recent months and years, but none has been publicly tied to members of the two groups. A Christian tourist was beaten in early August after raising an Israeli flag there, for which the tourist may face charges of incitement and disturbing the peace. An Israeli member of Knesset, Shuli Moalem, claims she was shoved during the interaction in 2014, that is in this video, and in early 2014, reports claim that footage shown here of a Hasidic family includes one boy having his side curls pulled and Muslims spitting and throwing shoes. All three of those incidents, of course, took place well before Glick's interview, in which the two groups were reported as engaging in nothing more than harassing and heckling. Nevertheless, we're seeing more and more protests of the ban on those groups and other Israeli police actions that do involve rock throwing and other acts of violence. In addition to clashes over the Temple Mount, rockets from Gaza appear to be increasing, and a rocket fired from Gaza damaged an empty bus and a private home in the town of Sderot, in which no injuries were reported. Israel launched retaliatory airstrikes against what it called 3 terror sites in Gaza, in which no injuries were reported as well. Israel has sent Iron Dome batteries to Sderot and Ashkelon. Moving on, in the high holiday season, many are visiting with relatives. Meredith Gansman checked in with one of the most iconic representations of the Jewish grandmother, actor Renee Taylor, of the 1990s television show The Nanny.
As the fall television season begins, one iconic Jewish television mother, Renee Taylor, has a new on-screen role. I met up with Taylor at Magnolia Bakery on the Upper West Side to talk about her new movie, Tango Shalom, written by her husband, actor, writer, and director Joe Bologna, and directed by her son, Gabriel Bologna, who also acts.
It was a wonderful experience, and I cried in every scene. That was fun. I love to cry.
You love to get verklempt and
Yes.
just let it out?
I do. I do.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm just close to my tears now.
Yeah.
I'm close to my laughter, and I'm close to my tears.
Renee credits the emotional experience to working with her son and husband, with whom she celebrated her 50th anniversary last month.
I don't know. We love each other, and we have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of adventures, and we appreciate each other. We're grateful for each other. We laugh a lot. I think that's what you need to have a marriage.
Taylor's half-century of marriage is unique for a Hollywood couple, though she says it doesn't have to be.
I always ask people, why are you breaking up? You two are so perfect for each other. What did you love about each other when you first met? And they say, well, I thought he was this, I thought she was that. Well, can't you find that feeling again and begin all over again? Because every day you have to decide to be married. You decide to be faithful. Every day you get up and you say, I'm going to be faithful today. Or you say, I think I'll cheat. I think I'll cheat and break up my marriage and make somebody very unhappy and sabotage myself and make a fool of myself. I think you decide. You really do.
Also, for nearly 50 years, Taylor has loved working in show business. In the early 1960s, as a comedienne, Taylor played the New York City nightclub Bonsoir. Then unknown, Barbra Streisand was her opening act. And in 1968, Taylor played Eva Braun in Mel Brooks' feature film The Producers. Taylor inherited her comedy chops from her family, she says.
I always thought my mother was funny. And as I went along, I said, someday I'm going to write about my mother. And I remember things she said because everything she said was funny. Everything she did was funny. My whole family was crazy. Very funny. Outrageous people.
When she was hired to play Fran Drescher's mother, Sylvia Fine, on the 1993 series The Nanny, she based the character on her Aunt Mitzi.
She lived in Pelham Parkway. She was a big flirt. She used to have a fan. A different fan with her outfits. And she would even go to the butcher and flirt with him.
Though Taylor and Drescher's own mother, Sylvia, were already very similar.
Her mother is a wonderful woman, and her mother is a lot like me. She's a lot of fun, and she dresses a lot like I dress, and she has red hair, only she wears it like this.
One of Taylor's favorite memories from the series was filming with celebrity guest star, the late Elizabeth Taylor.
And she had like her big diamond ring that was $4 million or something, and I said, could I try that on? And she said, no. She wouldn't let that off her finger. I said, I'm not going to walk out with it.
Besides countless celebrity guest stars, another constant on The Nanny was lots of eating.
Where you gotta scrape and scrounge and fight for every last morsel of food.
Go over here, I'm kidding you. At one time, there was a whole family singing with Mr. Sheffield and his family and me and the kids and Fran, and I didn't have any lines, and I was just sitting there. And we had real food. I just started eating off everybody's plate, and that just became a funny thing, and that's what I did.
For more on Renee Taylor, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. This week on Up Close, when we examine what's controlling us, we find different sources of authority. In the realm of the mind, new science reveals that our brain is making decisions before we're even consciously aware of them. The conflict and interaction between our theory of the mind and what science is discovering is explored by journalist Casey Schwartz in the Minefields, exploring the new science of neuropsychoanalysis. And then, the realm of the law includes many citations of a higher authority. But who establishes that authority and how? Yale University professor Christine Hayes examines that question with What's Divine About Divine Law? Early Perspectives. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Casey Schwartz. There's been an immense, a great quantity of discovery in recent years about what the mind is, what the brain is doing, where we have ways to look at the brain that we never even conceived of when we started examining what the mind does, and we know so much now compared to what we knew 15, 20 years ago.
True.
How is that changing things for the field of examining what the mind does?
There's no doubt we're in the age of neuroscience. This is we're in the age of the brain. It's our modern age of the brain. And since I would say, let's say probably the early 90s or even the late 80s, neuroscience has become this it's sort of the hot shot field. It's where the brilliant young scientists flock in graduate school. It's where government funding is going. It's where in a sense, many of the best and brightest in science are gravitating to this study of the brain, with its promise that we're just on the cusp of knowing everything finally.
You have these two distinct fields, and that are trying to be married. That you have neuroscience and psychoanalysis, and that there's kind of a trajectory with each, where Freud starts with his ideas of the mind that slowly develop kind of why we're doing various things from the inside out. And then you have neuroscience that literally is limited at first to the electrical signals at the outside of the brain, and slowly we're getting imaging equipment to get further and further. They meet in curious ways and cross back and forth these trajectories.
You're right. I mean, they're made of totally different stuff. Yet you're already seeing these very old school Freudian ideas beginning to crop up in neuroscientific labs, but under different names. Like, for instance, I mean, there's famously what's going on right now is like this whole idea of the unconscious. Well, for decades, modern cognitive science basically didn't believe in the unconscious. Well, but now it's clear there's mental life that we're not, in fact, most of what happens in our head we're not aware of. So now the unconscious is very hot in neuroscience, but it goes by names like implicit processing. So it's sort of been stripped of its like Freudian beginnings, and they have to be sort of hidden away, and made acceptable for the sterile environs of a laboratory.
And yet, and at the same time, here we are today, and we have all these discoveries, and we have all these great machines for looking inside the brain, and we're not actually answering these broad, big questions about the mind, who we are and why we are and how we are and how we act and so on and so forth.
Yes, completely. I mean, when you read these sort of, when you read the multitude of these kind of shiny, flashy neuroscience studies that, appear in the New York Times and everywhere else, you sort of think like, wow, okay, but where's the inner life? Sort of, where's human personality and experiences as I know it? And you're right, it seems like 100 years of clinical insight is kind of not quite making it yet into these neuroscience labs and methods.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, Iowa Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast on the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.